Hi, thanks for joining me. Today I'd like to do a vlog and just talk about my experiences with Clamp. I just felt like doing this. I wanted to do a little talkie vlog and I wanted to talk about anime. And I was thinking about Clamp because I just picked up Angelic Layer and I was going to research and get their whole timeline of stuff and put that all together, but in the end, I think it's just easier for me, and hopefully will be interesting for you, just to recount my personal experiences with this prolific, long-running, and significant, you know, creative group in the anime and manga and even video game worlds. So my introduction to Clamp was probably via anime. And I'm going to say that it was with Magic Knight's Ray Earth. Now, I believe I was introduced to this series via an anime club at a college that was nearby to the one that I attended. I did attend college in an area where there were several other colleges. And personally, I started the anime club at my school. So we would screen things, but because of that, I also was friendly with the anime clubs at the surrounding schools, at least somewhat, and I would try to attend them now and then. So, attending one of their meetings, I was introduced to some of the episodes of Ray Earth, and I thought it was really interesting. Now, the cool thing about Ray Earth, and I think it was really one of the breakout successes for Clamp early on. Now, as far as I know, they were a doujin circle, and I probably don't need to explain that to most of you these days. I have a feeling that, as opposed to 20 years ago, it's a little. I think people know what that is a bit more, but suffice to say, Japanese fandom has a long-running tradition at this point of fan-created works and original works, sort of self-published in small batches and small groups. So Clamp was one of those groups, and they're one of those examples of people that went pro after having originally done kind of amateur self-published fan work. And I found that personally inspiring. I always really wanted to, and really looked up to people who took initiative and kind of did their own thing and didn't sort of bow down to the corporate interests and things like that, but were able to really carve their own niche, doing their own thing and building up an audience in kind of a grassroots way. Unfortunately, I don't know, because of my lack of real talent, maybe, or whatever it is, I never, was able to follow through with anything as impressive as that. But I've always admired people who've been able to, and so Clamp was inspirational to me in that way. Some of their early works are things like Rig Beta or Tokyo Babylon. These were animated, and I don't know a lot about them. I assume that they did them professionally as comic book artists, and they were later picked up for animation. I only have vague memories of either of those. Maybe more so Rig Beta than Tokyo Babylon. I'm not even sure that maybe had never seen Tokyo Babylon. I know I saw some of Rig Beta. I seem to just remember it being sort of amateurish and not something that was all that good. But certainly, even in their early works, there was something there. I think their character designs are striking. I think that their characters have always been interesting, and I think that there's been real potential there with the work that the group does. Now, Ray Earth, I think, was one of those first things that really synergized their talents, and so was something that caught the attention of kind of a wider group of people. Certainly, a lot of video game fans may be familiar with the Sega Saturn game that was based on Magic Knight's Ray Earth, and they did actually go on to do a sequel manga series to Ray Earth. So it was really one of those things that I think was significant to them, and something that I think had legs sort of beyond the initial manga series that they did. There were a couple of video games on the Game Gear. There was even famously a Game Gear based on Magic Knight Ray Earth. It's red and has the Ray Earth logo on it and stuff. It's pretty cool. I always found the characters in the world pretty interesting. But ultimately, it does have a certain predictability to it, and I mean it has a something of a surprise ending, but I do think that the ending is telegraphed a little bit. And I feel like the way that the story is plotted is somewhat it feels kind of predetermined. I think it was something that they had to work through in their early story writing. But it's been nice to see Clamp in particular evolve over the years, and I don't think that I've followed with everything that they've done, but I do think that they've grown as a group, and I think that they've done a lot of interesting things because of that. The next thing that I'm probably the most familiar with by them would be this here, Miyuki-chan in Wonderland. Now, this is just an animated short. This was serialized in New Type. And it's this weird, like, kind of, I guess, playfully sexual kind of coming of age of this girl here, Miyuki, as she's sucked into these, like, magical worlds. And I guess in that way it's maybe almost some sort of deconstruction of Magic Knight's Rayearth, I suppose, where, but in this case it's sort of these two shorts. One, she goes into Wonderland, and all of the characters in Wonderland are reimagined as monster girls, basically. So if you think that's some sort of a new thing, it's not. And then there's the Mirror Land, where she encounters like herself and mirrors of, I don't know, things in her life, I guess. But these are really, it's just fun. It's a short, I think it was like maybe 6 chapters in New Type, and again, it was just an experiment of theirs. I think that it's been fun to see Clamp try different things throughout the years. There's 4 people in the group. As far as I know, one person does a lot of the, the sort of the main writing roles, and one person does a lot of the main art roles, and the other 2, I think, are kind of support those roles. So, but obviously they've made it. They've stuck together, and so they've had a long time to try a lot of different things. Another thing they did around that time that I think was a very interesting experiment was called Clover. I don't think that this was finished. I used to own copies of it. I think as recently as just this past summer, I got rid of some of my Clamp manga. I got rid of a lot of my manga because I just don't have space for some of that. I don't necessarily read it anymore, and some of it I can get digitally. So I think I'll be getting some of those things to replace the physical versions that I've gotten rid of. But suffice to say, the thing that's very cool about Clover is the way that the artist was experimenting with how you tell a story on the page. Experimenting with what happens in the gutters between the panels, and just with the craft of kind of sequential storytelling, and sequential artwork. And I always really appreciated those experiments that she was doing at that time. So as part of that experimentation, I think not everything is going to work out, and that brings us to X 1999. You guys may or may not be familiar with this. My buddy, I think, was into Clamp, probably more so even than I, and he was getting the X manga right from day one in Japanese, and it was fun to be able to check out that manga. And at the time too, like anime was fresh and it was new and it was interesting, and X in particular was interesting because it. I think there was this synergy between what Clamp was doing with their comic about the kind of the end of a millennium. You're talking the year 1999 going into 2000, and I think it was very this kind of dark, brooding, emo, apocalyptic thing that they were trying to do, and stylistically it was very successful. I think it has a very cool visual style, and the band X Japan kind of. I think did the theme. I kind of sort of forget, but basically the theme for X, the movie. They did a movie based on the manga before it had really gotten very far, and but unfortunately I think it's a manga that they never really finished. And I also think that it was ultimately not all that good, at least like what I experienced of it. It always I was into it at the time because we kind of all were, because it was an exciting thing that was happening, but ultimately, I think it was something that they were kind of like struggling with figuring out how to sort of like write the story and these characters, and I don't think it worked out as well as it could have. And sort of right on the coattails of that, while they actually still did X for a number of years, I believe, and I don't think they ever finished the series, but they did Cardcaptor Sakura, and I think that this was, I don't know that it was a direct response to X, but it's a very big shift in tone, and I remember thinking personally at the time that I felt like this was pretty dumbed down from the stuff that they were doing, because I think that they were doing interesting experimental stuff between like Miyuki-chan and Wonderland and X Japan, or not X Japan, but X 1999, and some of those things, Clover, and then for them to go to this, it felt a little bit odd, but I think that they needed it at the time, and it was extremely successful for them. So, from that perspective too, I think that this as much as Magic Knight Rayearth kind of raised them up a level into like this real mainstream success, with a long running anime series, long running serialized manga, and as far as I know, they're doing a new Cardcaptor. So I'm looking forward to that here coming up, and I grew to like Cardcaptor quite a lot. It's fun. I think it holds up to the test of time, and I think the simplicity of it, and maybe even the dumbing down, so to speak, of it to a bit more of a kiddie level and more of a general audience level, wasn't necessarily a bad thing. There were a lot of shows that sort of appeal to that wide range that are very good, and I like a lot, and Cardcaptor Sakura is one of them. Now, after Cardcaptor, they didn't stop experimenting, and they didn't stop doing good things. I think probably some experiments worked out and some didn't. But my timeline is a little foggy, and I haven't necessarily kept up with everything that Clamp does. Certainly, Angelic Layer was one of the things that came out, after Cardcaptor Sakura. I mentioned in my other video, I think this is one of their most successful things, at least for me. The characters, I think, are good. I think the premise is good. It's, it takes some of the good things about Cardcaptor Sakura, I think, with the two main characters in this, remind me a bit of Sakura and, Tomoyo from, or maybe that was the one girl in this. I think Tomoyo is the one in Cardcaptor Sakura. But anyway, they kind of remind me of them. And you have this great character in like this goofy, I don't know what you call him, an engineer basically, who makes these robotic toys that people compete with. It's very good. So it was nice to see them really being able to make solid series and sort of follow up a success with another success. Something else I remember from around that time is called Holic, and I seem to remember watching that. I did see they did do an animation for it, and I did watch it. At least a season. I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember that it's supernatural, and that was interesting. And I remember it being an interesting show. It had a really unfortunate name, though. I kind of wish that they had done something a little bit different with it when they brought it over here, because they ended up calling it XXX Holic. And here, unfortunately, of course, that has the connotation of sort of like hardcore pornography, which this didn't have anything to do with. The XXX would, I believe, serve the same purpose as maybe just like two X's as a placeholder for like, a variable. Like you can put in whatever you want into the holic. So sort of like alcoholism. It would be whatever holism, love holism, or so it was basically kind of about addiction. to a certain extent. I forget exactly how it worked into the story. It was a long time ago, and apparently, I guess Holic probably wasn't one of my favorite Clamp things. Some of my other probably not favorite Clamp things are some. They've done some sort of like Clamp universe stuff. So things like actually, I don't really know if Clamp Campus Detectives was like this. I feel like it was, but there's that. There's some other sort of like Clamp stuff, and so they'll take characters and things from a lot of their different Clamp series, and they'll sort of mash them together into some of these like mashup series. Interesting, interesting sort of approach, but I don't think I ever really got into any of those series all that much. But let's see. So I feel like maybe even I fell out of touch with Clamp for a little bit. I did end up seeing something else though that I liked quite a bit, and I would call this some of their more mature work, probably. As the years have gone on, here we have Kobato. These are still sealed. I watched them digitally, so I've just never bothered to open up the DVDs. I really wanted to own them on DVD, but these are from 2009, so you're getting to just before the teens, and Kobato is interesting because it's kind of a fairy tale. It's kind of a love story. It's kind of a drama, but like when it comes down to it, it's basically this girl has this bottle that she needs to fill with, I think, people's wishes, or like fulfilling people's wishes or something like that. But she ends up like working at a preschool or something like that, which is going to be shut down, and it has some like weird animal characters in it and stuff too. It's cool. I liked Kobato because it's a little odd, it's a little unique, and it reminded me of Clamp doing their experimentations again and trying different things and doing something I think that was a little more mature, without doing like kind of their old emo stuff, without it being too predetermined feeling. I really feel like by the time like you get to Kobato, it's not necessarily their most entertaining show. I would say that things like even Miyuki-chan in Wonderland, I would say, is more entertaining. Angelic Lair, Cardcaptor Sakura, even maybe Magic Knight Rayearth, are probably more entertaining shows. But this, I think, is the kind of thing that I like to see a group like Clamp doing as they mature as artists. Yeah, so that said, I probably should revisit what Clamp is up to these days. I feel like I'm a little bit out of the loop. Like I said, I know it looks like they're going to do another Cardcaptor Sakura thing, which is very cool. Some things that I know of that I've never really caught up on that I've wanted to. Maybe there's only one thing, because I'm thinking of Blood Sea. Now, Blood, of course, being it's a vampire story. I'm not going to get into Blood. I haven't seen it as much of sort of the Blood extended stuff as I want to, but Blood Sea in particular I really wanted to see, because it's Clamp. It's Clamp Designs. I think they did the story too, I've been meaning to see that for a long time. There are some other things I've seen, like the Rayearth OVAs, which was a retelling of the Rayearth story. I wasn't a big fan. I didn't really like how they retold Rayearth. I thought it was good originally. I probably would have preferred that they animated the second series, and I don't know if they did. So yeah, in some ways I feel like my history with Clamp is one of fandom. It's one of expectations, of inspiration, and a certain amount of shame of not necessarily having kept up with them as closely as I may have. If you guys have any other Clamp recommendations, I guess I'd really love to hear about them. I'd love to hear what your experiences are with Clamp. Without a doubt, please put those recommendations in the comments, and I hope that you found this enjoyable, and I hope you'll join me again for more anime and video game related videos. Take care.